Our third river valley civilization is the Nile, otherwise known as Egypt. But the Nile is the river that gave life to support the Egyptian civilization. This is a view of Egypt by satellite, and Egypt is famous for being in the desert, but you can notice this green, fertile area. That is the Nile River. The Nile River is famous because it flows from south to north, meaning it flows this way as opposed to flowing towards the South Pole. It is very, very fertile because the Nile River floods every year at the exact same time. So the Egyptians could prepare for it. And the flooding was a good thing because it put nutrients into soil, which made literally an area that is majority desert fertile enough to support a large population. So, we're going to hit the highlights of things that you need to know about the Nile River Valley civilization, or you can call it Egypt. Probably what it's most famous for and what you guys are most familiar with is mummification. Yes, we do have Egyptian mummies today in museums all over the world that we love to gaze upon because it's so interesting to think about how they took care of their dead. This was obviously a way to show us that they had accomplished the civilization characteristic of religion because the mummification was done for religious purposes. The idea that the body or the soul lived on and that you needed a body preserved for an afterlife. They were polytheistic. They had multiple gods and goddesses that were not really animal, not really human. They were both that they worshiped and followed and made sacrifices to. Okay. Let's scoot on down. Here's some famous Egyptian mummies for you, which is just crazy because Seti looks like he's about to just wake up and talk to us there, doesn't he? The first pharaoh, meaning the first person that was the ruler of Egypt, and when we talk about government for Egypt, pharaoh was basically the king, and Menes was his name, and he was the first person to take Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt and combine them into one, and so that's how he became the first pharaoh, so the first ruler. So it was a monarchy that we established in Egypt, and that term for the king or queen was pharaoh. Okay. Egyptian history is split up into three time periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Pharaohs run through all three, and there are different dynasties of pharaohs. Dynasty is a word you have to know, meaning it was a certain family that was in power. Pharaohs built pyramids, and the pyramids were built for pharaohs to be their final burial and resting place. And obviously, as you know, pharaohs weren't buried alone. They were buried with family members, they were buried with slaves, and they were buried with a lot of treasure, which is why so many people broke into the pyramids and tried to rob them of the treasure that the pharaohs were buried with. To know that there was cities in Egypt. Memphis was the capital of Egypt for several years. And this is an image of what the city of Memphis looked like, with a lot of tall buildings. You see your pyramids in the distance. This was a very advanced civilization. The Middle Kingdom, where, if we were face to face, we might delve into this more, but the Middle Kingdom is famous for being taken over by people outside of Egypt, and then eventually the Egyptian people kicking them out. Those were called the Hyksos. And then the New Kingdom is probably what you're most familiar with from things that you've learned about before, like Cleopatra was in the New Kingdom, King Tut was in the New Kingdom, things like that. Okay. We know that there were social classes in Egyptian society, specifically because they had a slave class, but also in things that we look at that they had left behind, that we study artifacts. We know that there were different styles of homes, different jobs. Priests had a lot of political power. So things that we know that gave them a social class system. There obviously was a system of writing, and they wrote on paper. They made paper out of the papyrus plant. And one of the big things that I want to point out, so that you can maybe win $5 off of your parents, hieroglyphics is not something that is a like everyday writing system of Egypt. Only the high priests were trained in hieroglyphics, and that was only used in burials. Hieratic script was what was used for everyday. And it was just a very simpler version of hieroglyphics. So way more people were able to write in what was called hieratic script than they were in hieroglyphics. The Egyptians also made a 365-day calendar, which guess what we have today? A 365-day calendar. So we copied that from them with their technology. Between this and the reading, you should be able to come up with all 6 characteristics of a civilization from Egypt.